There, now it's green.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Good morning. I know all of you. This is a challenge when you also wear hearing aids, all kind of things hanging on, and then masks hanging on our ears. You all know what it is. Okay, good morning. I know every one of you. I still will want to introduce myself. I'm Jan Rhoades, and I'm representing Education for Conflict Resolution. I'm on the board of directors of Education for Conflict Resolution, and I'm also a school attendance mediator, and I'll have a chance to tell you more about that soon. The other thing I want to share with you is some of you know that I spend a lot of time with which, by the way, we call for short ECR. That's a mouthful. Some of you know that I spend a lot of time with this, so I'm really glad to have a chance to share with you who we are and what we do. But especially, I'm glad to have a chance to share with you something that I've learned so much from, that I'm really invested in, and that I get a lot of satisfaction from. So I'm glad for that opportunity too. As I said, Education for Conflict Resolution is a mouthful, so we refer to ourselves as ECR. Just so you know, the word education does not mean that we're an academic organization. That word comes from the fact that we also provide training in conflict resolution in various forms that I'll share with you later. The education for our part of our name comes from those trainings and workshops that teach people how to peacefully resolve conflicts. In this slide, you'll see people doing a role play in preparation for the skills to do conflict resolution. Some of you may wonder why you've never seen our office in North Manchester. That's because we're tucked away in Manchester University. We're not part of the university, but they have generously given us office space. We're on the third floor of the Calvin Ura building, and this is a picture of our office. What's that?
Didn't they used to be at Thomas Marshall? Were they ever at Thomas Marshall?
Ever a what?
Thomas Marshall School?
No, we are not, and I'll kind of explain where we came about. But no, we are not a program of the university. This is a separate organization. And like I say, they've donated, they've allowed us to use their office space. So who we are, we're a nonprofit mediation service based in North Manchester. We were founded in 1988 by a coalition of citizens led by Manchester University Professor Gary Zimmerman. Gary had attended some workshops on mediation and wanted to bring that back. So a group of people, initially church and community people, came together to develop this organization. It was initially a coalition of churches. At this point, we are not a church-related organization, although many of us are connected with various churches in the community. But we are a completely separate nonprofit organization. So at the start, we received a 3-year grant from the Center for Church and Community Missionaries to begin developing. Can you hear me now?
Just keep projecting.
Can you hear me? I think we're okay, Gary. Most or all of you have spent enough time in this chapel to know that we have technology issues here and there. We've okay. Can you hear me? All right. I've, I will try to keep my mouth right here. Um, we started in 1988, so as you might see, this year we are 35 years old, and we're celebrating that anniversary in various ways, and I will share some of that with you. Some people consider that we may be one of the most hidden gems of Wabash County. And that's one of the reasons that we want you to know who we are and what we offer. We were not a hidden gem in 2015. We were not a hidden gem in 2015 when the Chamber of Commerce awarded us the Spirit of the Community Award. It reads Education for Conflict Resolution. In grateful recognition of your inspiring commitment and volunteer efforts, which has shaped the character and touched the many lives over years within North Manchester. We're grateful for that recognition. By the way, Chamber of Commerce is now Manchester Alive, as I imagine many of you know. That has our organizations tend to morph to address who we really are today. Why do the Wabash County courts and probation departments contract ECR's services? Because we provide an alternative to the punitive practices of both of these organizations. Our approach is to provide mediations that encourage the peaceful and civil resolution of conflict. And we model for families and youth how to take responsibility for personal actions and decisions and how to be motivated to get on the right track without resorting to fines and legal punishment. An overview of our services includes court-ordered mediations for families and couples in conflict. That means that the courts in Wabash County refer families to us when they have issues. This is generally not custody issues. The custody has already been established in the court. But if a family is having difficulty with transitions from one home to the other, sometimes there are issues of the rules in one house don't match the rules in the other house, and this causes conflict between the families. So we sit down with those families. Generally, one party has petitioned the other party. And when they go to court, the judge basically says, go to mediation and work it out, or we will decide for you. So there's a real motivation for families to participate in that program. We also offer school attendance mediations for school students with a pattern of absenteeism. I'd like to spend a little extra time explaining to you what that is, because that is the part of the organization that I'm most involved with. When a student has serious enough absentee or truancy issues, the when a student has attendance problems enough that, one, the state would require, after a certain number of absences, for the student to be referred to probation. Um, Secondly, their absences are getting in the way of their success in school. So at that point, the school refers that student and family to ECR. The mediator, well, there are two mediators, but the lead mediator contacts the parent to learn something about how the parent sees the attendance issue. What's going on in terms of the student's challenges, in terms of the difficulties with school, in terms of any home issues that may be getting in the way. Sometimes they're basically transportation issues that we've been able to resolve fairly quickly. So we sit down, we phone the parent, and then we sit down in a conference room with student, parent, school personnel, which is most often the vice principal who is responsible for attendance, and a counselor or teacher with whom the student is involved. What we do is first hear from the student. Students need to be heard, and often when they're in the principal's office, they're being talked to. And so we give the student an opportunity to really tell their own story. Now, it's not unusual for a student to start out with, "I hate school." And that is a very common one we hear. And we try to go beyond that and talk about what is it. Sometimes they're peer issues. I don't want to be in school because I'm being picked on. Um, Sometimes they are absolutely learning issues, and the student has maybe along the way throughout their schooling received some kind of special education or special services. But by the time maybe they reach junior high or high school, some of that has fallen behind because they are now taking courses with a larger group of students. Um, some of those are the challenges. One of the examples I think of was a boy in junior high who said, "I hate school." And he wanted to be a farmer. His dad was a farmer. He wanted to be a farmer. He liked working on farm machinery with his dad. As far as he was concerned, there was no point in being in school and graduating from high school. Now, that is not the way his parents saw it. They wanted him to finish high school. And he was also failing chemistry. So the school personnel reach out with ways, once they really hear the student, with ways to try to help that student resolve some of the issues. In this case, they said, "You can drop chemistry now and take it in the summer. That will give you a study hall where you can address some of the other issues that you have academically." Wabash County has an excellent career center, the Heartland Career Center, that's available to students from all of the 4 high schools in Wabash County. In this case, the Career Center offers an excellent agriculture program. And so this student was told, if you can finish these credits and these credits by the end of your sophomore year, you can apply. And by the way, there's enough demand that students have to apply to participate in the Career Center. They go to the Career Center half day and complete other credits that are required back at their home school. So that's just one of the examples of a situation. Sometimes there are real crises at home. I have also met with 3 families who are experiencing tremendous grief. One was a best friend of the girl who had died in a home fire. And both she and her father were grieving, and it was making it very difficult for her to be involved in school. Another was a situation where a mother had been murdered over the summer, and the children were living with their grandmother. So all of them were dealing with not only how the community saw them, but with grief in their home. Another family I met recently, the father had died just before the beginning of the school year. Um, and so mother and two students were again dealing with grief issues. We do not provide counseling. We do not provide legal advice, but we do provide referrals. If there's something that we can see a student needs, and in this case, I also learned that there is a grief support organization called Aaron's House in Fort Wayne, and they have support groups for youth, starting with children's groups for certain ages and up through teens. Um, One of the advantages for students dealing with, for youth dealing with grief, is that they don't have to, if you're in counseling, you're right in front of a counselor and you're expected to express yourself and deal with it. When you're in a group, you can hear the other youth, hear them share, and when something touches you, then you're able, in a much less confrontive kind of a way, to share your grief. So that was something that was actually quite challenging for me this year. Um, Another challenge that I really got joy out of is that I grew up speaking Spanish, and I had an opportunity this year to have mediations with two families where the parents spoke only Spanish. The student naturally speaks both. They've been in school for a number of years and they've learned, but it is not appropriate to ask a young person to translate for their parents. The parents need to be able to speak and be heard without it going through the student. So it was a really satisfying process. The student, of course, could communicate with everybody in the school. Okay, just want to share a little more about my experience with Spanish speaking mediations this year. The student can communicate with school personnel. They're doing it all day in school, and with the parent. But the parent is not able to communicate with the school, nor are school personnel able to communicate with the parent. So that's the role that I play, along with helping to mediate. Like I said, we don't provide counseling, nor do we provide solutions. These come from the participants. Gradually, in the process of talking about what the issues are, the student will begin to agree or come up with some things that they are willing to do to resolve the attendance problems or any other issues that are going on in school that are getting in the way of their success. The parent talks about what they can do. Um, and the school, like I say, they will reach out, the example of the boy who could drop chemistry and could in that way be motivated to go on to the career center. So my experience is that once we sit down together for 50 minutes to an hour, the school personnel really hear the student and understand where the student is coming from. As this process is going on, ideas are generated and agreements begin to be made. So we start writing down, these are the things the student will do, the parent will do, the school will do, and what we come up with eventually is an agreement, which is signed by all parties. And that makes a commitment. It makes each one accountable. And very often for the student to not feel so helpless, that accountability and that saying, these are the things I will do, can make a real difference in the student's life. So I've shared a whole lot on that because that's the thing I'm most involved in. And you can imagine the satisfaction it gives me and the challenge it really is at times. Okay, I cover school attendance mediation. We also are preparing to provide a restorative justice program. The probation officer in Wabash County has recognized that some young people are referred for things that are really pretty minor offenses, and they become an offense against another individual whom they have hurt. It also kind of breaks down what's going on in the community and the agreements the community have about appropriate behavior. So we are just beginning this program. we will be sitting with the young people, because this is a referral from the juvenile probation, sitting down with the parties who are concerned. It may be the person who is hurting someone else, the person who's been hurt. Generally, we bring in family or other people who are part of that process. So this is something that we are just beginning to develop, but we see a lot of potential for that. ECR has trained thousands of people in Indiana, Wabash County, in conflict resolution skills. This is a photo of a group of trainees doing role plays. This one happens to be also something of a dialogue circle. Unfortunately, mediation nonprofits in Indiana have not flourished in this century. Many have closed their doors in the last 10 years because of economic conditions and COVID. It's a testament to the value of our services to the community and to the local, that the local mediators have been supported, that ECR has managed to stay afloat for so many years. This is an overview of some of the training that we do. Productive communication, conflict workshop, helping community members learn how to communicate civilly across political, cultural, and personal divides. The school attendance mediations I've already described to you in detail. Another training is mediating interpersonal conflict. And that's something that is often offered to students at the university. It adds a great deal to the skills of social workers, peace studies majors, educators. So those are not preparing to be specifically mediators, but they are preparing with skills that they will take into the workplace. Excuse me? Did they?
What's an example of that?
Okay, I remember a role play where, and obviously we have to create role plays for the training, where there had been an issue in a neighborhood where somebody's tree fell on the other person's property, and the person whose tree fell simply wasn't willing, just simply did not clean it up. And rather than going to the courts or the county council and complaining about this, they were willing to sit down together and come up with a situation, with an agreement of how they would resolve that situation. That's one simple example. The ones in that situation, it was a role play. So that was one of the trainings that we had. More question, Ron? In any situation, the mediating interpersonal conflict. Another place, and I will talk about that a little later, that can be used is in the workplace. Issues and conflicts develop in the workplace. And sometimes that's another place where sitting down together, defining what the issues are, really hearing each other. I think you all know when you're in conflict, you tend to be preparing what you're going to say next, defensiveness and all of that. And a part of the process is learning good listening skills. Sometimes that means hearing what the other person says and actually being asked to not parrot it, but to say, this is what I understand you're saying. Am I right? So that's a process that is taught in the mediating interpersonal conflict. There also, from my perspective as a social work educator, pretty much basic skills that we teach in social work, how to really listen to a person and how to let them know that you heard what they said. So those are some of the skills that we teach in those workshops. I think I've pretty much, okay, the court-ordered mediations have been funded since 2017 by the Wabash Court. And I give you some description of what that is. The participants do pay something on a sliding fee scale. So it is required, the court pays us whatever amount beyond what the participants pay. But again, it's an issue of accountability. You pay for the services and you take it seriously. And again, like I said, if you don't work it out in mediation, the court may make the decisions for you. Here's what one person in in the Wabash County legal system said about the value of our court-ordered mediations. More often than not, the case gets resolved, saving the court precious time and giving litigants tools to resolve matters without resorting to court process. A part of doing this together means also teaching people how to resolve conflict. And if we have two parents who are parenting children in two different homes, it's very likely that similar conflicts will arise. And part of the process is teaching them to listen to one another. And hopefully there will be, of course, other conflicts that arise. Hopefully they have learned the skills that they need in order to address those conflicts. Okay, I've covered this very fully. So how successful has ECR's school attendance program been in helping kids in school? You might be curious how such sessions, what our success is. This gives you an idea of the regional service area. Our school attendance mediations have been primarily in Wabash County, but you can see the counties surrounding. For example, this fall, Kosciuszko County asked us to do a mediation at Warsaw High School that gave them an opportunity to see how we do it, what the outcomes are. So some of the surrounding counties are becoming interested in what we do. This bar graph says it all. The data reflected in this bar graph says all we need to know about the success of the SAMS program. Except for Wabash County, all other service area counties have higher in and out of school suspensions and expulsions than Wabash County, and not by just a little. We at ECR know that there are certainly other factors at play here. But given these others, the record of the other counties, you can see that ECR has made a difference in students' attendance and being able to stay in school. When the probation departments around the state saw this graph, they began to call us about getting training for their volunteers to do SAMS mediations. By the way, this data was collected and collated by an independent agency, Transform Consulting Group, as a part of a year-long strategic analysis of our organization that we did in 2022. ECR offers productive communication workshops, helping people find ways to cut through personal, political, and cultural barriers that divide us. And Ron had a good question about that, and I think I've given you some examples of how the community can use those mediations.
If it works this well, why isn't everybody using it?
Ron,
If it
Go ahead.
works- If it works this way, why isn't everybody using this?
why isn't everybody using it, he said? Why are they using it? Why is not everybody?
Yeah,
Okay, the question, why is not everybody using it? Everybody doesn't know. There have been organizations in Indiana, many that have provided these services. And as I said, they've died out. Part of it has been financial, but we have been able to provide a service that obviously our schools keep coming back to. But when other counties saw this, they said, we need that program. We want that program. In fact, the mediation that I did in Warsaw was their effort to take a look at what we're doing. And coming this fall, we have prepared a training program that will be available to other counties to come and bring. Part of it's going to be virtual training because these are generally working people who have other things going on in their lives. And part of it will be one day on a weekend when the participants come and do some of the role-playing kinds of things that I talked about. And then the other part of it, which I'm really looking forward to, is that the participants will then be mentored by us, the experienced mediators. That means they will sit in on a school attendance mediation with one of us and observe. The second time, they will take notes and begin to pull together the plan that I described to you. Following that, the person who's being trained will actually complete mediations on their own, obviously with a mentor who can give them feedback, encouragement. We all need a whole lot of encouragement for what we do. And we work together as a team. An important part of what we do as team members is build each other up and say, that really worked. That was great. What a good idea. So those are the ways that we build each other up. So this training program will not bring more trainers for Wabash County. It will allow other counties, and we've already had contacts from a number of the surrounding counties to develop their own school attendance mediation program. And the other thing that we have in Wabash County is that we're short of mediators. We are doing so many right now that we're short of mediators. So two of the people who are going to be trained in the fall are young people. That's the other thing we're short of is young people. We are mostly retired. That gives us time and flexibility to do it. But we really want to bring some younger people into it. So two of the people who are already signed up for training next fall are younger people. One is a student who will be at the college for another 2 years, and that means she'll be available to work with us. Of course, a full-time student. The other is a Peace Studies intern, and I won't try to explain that, but following a year of following a graduation, some graduates have the opportunity to stay on with the university for another year and coordinate Peace Studies programming. So those, they not necessarily become mediators, but we do have one who's planning to do that. So I hope that answers your question. Why don't they do that in the other counties? They don't know how. They didn't know how valuable it is. And once we publicize this, they're asking us for that training and to be able to provide it in their own counties. So can we move on, Gary, to the regional state demographics? At least a third of the households in Indiana are single-parent households, with Grant County at close to 1/2, 45%. 1/3, 33% of single-parent households live in poverty. Indiana's divorce rates have decreased between 2008 and 2018 by 10%, but Indiana is still higher than the national divorce rate. Indiana has higher rates of the following: adverse childhood experiences, and I'm going to take some time to explain to you what those are and how we define those. Emotional, behavioral, and developmental conditions, maltreatment, and bullying. To return to the the adverse childhood experiences, mental health professionals have identified. Adverse childhood experiences. Mental health professionals have identified 10 experiences that children may have during the years they're growing up. In other words, between birth to age 18, which have a lifelong impact for them. And I just want to share what some of those are, because these are really important in understanding something about child development. First of all is physical abuse, which is non-accidental harm. It includes injuries like bruises, lesions, fractures. People cause these injuries by hitting, punching, kicking, shaking, beating, burning, or throwing. And I think it's one of the painful things that we read in the newspaper too often, way too often. Sexual abuse is sexual behavior with a child or sexual exploitation of a child. This abuse includes indecent exposure and using a child in prostitution or pornography. Emotional abuse is behavior that interferes with a child's mental health. This type of abuse includes verbal abuse, mental abuse, and psychological maltreatment. Emotional abuse can be many things, including belittling, rejecting, ridiculing, blaming, threatening, isolating, restricting social interactions, denying the child an emotional response, purposely not talking to the child for extended periods of time. Physical neglect is failing to provide for a child's physical needs. And when we look at the poverty rates, we have to understand that physical neglect most often comes from poverty. Families who are simply not able to provide for medical care, for adequate fooding, sometimes are not able to get their children to school. One of the most visible of that is families in homelessness. And these families, as we know, sometimes are sleeping in cars. Getting those children to school on a regular basis, having them consistently in one school become tremendous challenges to families experiencing homelessness. I've already talked about emotional neglect. Mental illness is another factor in terms of adverse childhood experiences. Living with a relative with a mental health issue can have a significant impact on a child. Depending on their disorder, a parent may not take adequate care of the child. They may also fail to model appropriate behaviors for the child. Incarcerated relatives. When a child has a relative in prison, they're primarily growing up in a single parent family. Having an incarcerated parent is also challenging to the other parent who is home alone caring for the child. The child may also have trauma or feelings of abandonment. The absent parent may have modeled inappropriate behavior before imprisonment. Domestic abuse that children experience. When children experience domestic abuse, they often their primary attachment may have been to the mother. And for them to observe their mother being abused, and sometimes they feel threatened themselves, is certainly an adverse childhood experience, and one that, as all of these, can have lifelong impact on the child's development. Substance abuse is another, and again, this plays into neglect, physical neglect, emotional neglect when a parent is struggling with substance abuse issues. Divorce can impact children negatively. Some divorcing parents expose children to verbal and physical fighting. They also may ignore the child while working through their relationship issues. Some children feel that they are responsible for their parents' divorce. Custody fights may make a child feel unloved and pulled in different directions. On a national level, Gallup polling indicates that 500,000 employees a year resign due to conflict. And when employees call in sick due to conflict, it costs employers $2.2 billion a year. Employees are more likely to experience stress, anxiety, and burnout due to unresolved conflict on the job. Certainly, acquiring conflict resolution skills would be a boon to the workforce. I think this comes back, Ron, to another one of your questions about what are some of the other places that we can use the mediating interpersonal conflict skills. And we have offered workshops in workplaces through human resources departments of the employment to help employees learn to handle conflict. One of the most difficult is when it's conflict between an employee and a supervisor, because there's a power differential there. And it's often very difficult for them to sit down and really hear one another. The skills, this slide shows Manchester University students training for those kinds of skills. This is a photo from one of the 4th grade peace learning days at Koinonia Environmental and Retreat Center, depicting a trust exercise. Formerly, we offered this opportunity to all fourth grade students at Manchester Community Schools on an annual basis. But we have not offered this program in the last 4 years because of realities of COVID pandemic and because of the lack of funding for this program. I think I've pretty much covered this, but ECR keeps kids in school. ECR helps youth out of an unforgiving legal system. ECR brings justice and restitution to victims of crime and injury. ECR is an agent for positive change in the community, and ECR saves the county and state thousands of tax dollars. ECR helps keep families together by resolving domestic issues, providing training, which we've already talked about, and creating a supportive community atmosphere. So why am I talking to you today? Partly I told you because I want you to know what I'm doing and how important it is to me. First, we want you to get to know ECR and how important the work we do is to Wabash County. The court subsidizes with grants and individual donations, but they do not fund our services. ECR needs not just individual financial contributions, but also support from community groups and organizations and corporations to continue offering our programs. What can you do to help ECR? If you haven't guessed, your financial donations would be a very important part of helping us to continue to provide our services. We also need community volunteers to serve on our board. This year, I was excited to recruit 4 new really dynamite members for our board of ECR, board of directors of ECR. One of them is a Timbercrest resident, Jack Fisher, who has brought really good skills and new energy to our board. So we are always open to having the contributions of other people who might be interested in being on our board. I am the chair of the Board Development Committee, and I would be the person to talk to if that's something you're interested in doing. I have also provided the one-page handout that I gave you, obviously is a brief description of the things that I've already told you about today. But it includes a place, if you go on our website, workitout.org, there's a button where you can press to donate. I'm also have put envelopes in the back as you walk out. If you would like to give a contribution to ECR, you may pick up one of those envelopes. They're addressed to ECR, but since I'm here, you could put my name on it and put it in campus mail and save yourselves a stamp. So we've had some really good questions as I was proceeding. We have just a little time for maybe one or two additional questions if you have them.
How large is the board of directors? How many trade mediators like you are available here in?
Good questions. We had a board of 9, and I'm proud to say that I recruited 4 new board members this year. So we're up to a board of 13. We can always use other board members, particularly because each person who has added to our board brings such important insights, skills. So we could have a board of up to 15, and it would be really good. We're a working board. We're volunteers, but we do not, we all take very active part in the work of ECR. As far as the number of mediators, first of all, board members are not always mediators. Mediators are not always board members. I happen to be both. At this point in Wabash County, I think we have 12 people that we can contact for mediations. Unfortunately, their schedules do not always allow it. And I'll have to say that last December, I did 10 mediations in 1 month. And it was exhausting. It was satisfying, but it was exhausting. I've done 3 this year, and we do not have any more that are pending right now, which gives me a bit of a break.
Who's the top CEO or so, whatever?
You lower your mask.
Who is the top executive of your?
The chair of our board is Linda Troop, and I'm vice chair. Linda has 40 years of experience teaching English at Wabash High School. Many of us are retired educators, counselors. Those are some of the, Jack Fisher, for example, was a principal at Laketon and a number of other places. So he's bringing that experience, but Jack is also bringing administrative experience. So he is helping us develop a process and a form or a tool for evaluation of our executive director. It happens right now that the board chair, Linda Troop, is also part-time executive director. When we have the money, we would like to hire somebody she is way overworked, and we would like to hire somebody. We don't have that kind of funds now. She has been really successful in bringing in some grant money. In the past, really, these individual donations have been about 70% of our operating funds. And so we're working right now at finding funds. The Community Foundation has been wonderful in providing funding for us. For the strategic planning, the Transform Consulting Group that we hired to help us with that. Right now, they have awarded us money to develop the training program that we're going to provide in the fall. Ron?
What are the odds that this is going to work? In other words, you have some data that shows that this works over the long term.
What are the odds of that?
Ron's question is, what are the odds of having data that really show that this is working over the long term? The bar graph certainly is showing not only this past year, in fact, this year hasn't finished. These are data that have been collected from the schools and from the state. The state keeps records on students who have been suspended from school. And so the records, the Transform Consulting Group really went to work and found some of that data that we had not had. We basically didn't have time to do that. So they have really helped us to assess our outcomes and certainly to evaluate the needs that are out there. So what we're showing in Indiana, the other thing is that we phone the parent about 3 weeks after the mediation to see how things are going. We also send out a questionnaire to the schools, not on each child, or each student, but toward the end of the year on the success of our program. So those are some of the ways that we have accountability. Thank you so much. And I want to give Dean a chance to tell you about our April Seniors for Peace program.
Bob Johansson is going to be here for our April meeting. Bob is a graduate of Manchester College at the time. And he was one of the founders of the Peace Studies program at Notre Dame. And he's written a book called Where the Evidence Leads, A Realistic Strategy for Peace and Human Security. We sort of know now what doesn't work. We've gone into a number of countries to fix them, find out that it's not working very well. But he has a lot of solutions that do work. He's going to bring a few of his books too, so if you'd be interested in purchasing those, you can. And I want to mention too that Seniors for Peace does have a few expenses on occasion with speakers, not a lot, but if you want to make a donation at some point, you can do that too. Thank you.
Bob was my cousin, so all right. You know he's good at that.
Well, thank you, Jan. Thank you for coming. Fourth Thursday in